Welcome to the world of science fiction Neon's Alien. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and tap the notification bell so you never miss a new story from Neon's Alien universe. On the distant planet Zelzaria, there lived a queen feared across the stars. Her name was Queen Thalexa. She ruled from a black stone palace with golden towers and sharp spires that touched the sky. But her greatest power did not come from her army or her ships. It came from a creature kept beneath her palace. A beast, a monster, a living dragon with wings of fire and eyes like suns. Its name was Vulcan. No one dared go near it. No one except her. Vulcan was not born. It was built, part flesh, part machine, a creation of war, destruction, and terror. Once released on the battlefield, it could burn a city in minutes. But now it stayed locked deep inside the Queen's private hangar. Chained, watched, and always ready. One morning, the power in the hangar flickered. The lights dimmed. The floor shook. Alarms buzzed through the halls. A group of alien engineers rushed in, panicked. The energy core is failing. Systems are overloaded. Vulcan's cradle is losing power. Queen Thalexa arrived in her tall armor, her golden eyes burning. "Fix it now," she commanded. "Or you'll be feeding the beast yourselves." But none of the alien engineers knew how to fix it, because the energy core was old human tech. AI, backup system installed long ago during peace talks, and only one human still worked in the palace. A mechanic. Low-level, forgettable. His name was Mason Rook. Mason didn't wear armor. He didn't carry weapons. He wore a plain gray jumpsuit and carried a small toolkit. When the royal guards came to get him, he was fixing a broken door in the kitchen wing. "You, human, come now. The Queen demands your service." Mason wiped his hands with a towel. "All right, show me where." He didn't ask questions. He didn't show fear. But when they took him down to the dragon hangar, he paused. The hangar was massive, dark, cold. At the center was Vulcan, chained with thick, glowing metal cuffs. Its wings folded, its tail slowly moving. It was not asleep. It was watching. And now, it was watching him. The alien engineers stood far back. The guards held weapons ready. Mason walked forward alone, toward the broken energy unit. Vulcan's golden eye followed his every move. The Queen watched from behind a glass shield above. Mason knelt beside the power core. Sparks flew. He didn't flinch. "This unit's older than my grandmother's toaster," he said aloud, opening the panel. He started working, tightening bolts, reconnecting wires, humming softly. Vulcan moved, just a little. One claw scraped the floor. The guards raised their weapons. "It's agitated. He's too close," but the Queen raised her hand. "Wait." Vulcan's eyes narrowed. Then, its giant head lowered toward the human. Everyone froze. Mason kept working. "Easy, big guy," he whispered. "I'm just here to help you keep the lights on." And then something no one expected happened. Vulcan let out a deep rumble, not a growl, a sound like a tired breath, a sound of calm. The chains didn't shake. The beast didn't roar. It simply watched the human with interest, as if it understood, as if it remembered. 10 minutes passed. Mason stood up. "Fixed, but you'll need new connectors soon. This setup's held together with hope and duct tape." He turned to leave. Vulcan did something else. It lowered its head almost to the ground, eyes still locked on him. The guards gasped. The Queen stood slowly. She whispered, "That dragon has never bowed to anyone but me." Mason scratched his head and shrugged. Maybe he just respects a good mechanic. He walked out, toolbox in hand. Vulcan didn't move. It simply watched him go. Quiet. Still. Like a weapon waiting for its true master to return. High above, Queen Thalexa narrowed her eyes for the first time in years. She felt something she hadn't felt since she took the throne. Uncertainty. The next morning, the entire palace buzzed with one word: human. Not because of politics, not because of war, but because a human, just a mechanic, had walked away from Volcran, the Queen's dragon. Alive. Worse than that, the dragon bowed to him. Inside her royal chamber, Queen Thalexa paced in silence. The walls were covered in battle trophies, skulls of enemies, swords of fallen kings, maps of conquered worlds. But today, her eyes stared only at one screen. On repeat. Mason Rook, standing calmly in front of the most feared creature in the galaxy, and Volcran lowering its head like an obedient hound. Her advisor, Vornak, spoke carefully. My queen, perhaps this is a sign. Perhaps the beast remembers, something in his DNA. Human-made coding, yes? Thalexa's voice was sharp. I don't believe in accidents or in loyalty that isn't earned. She turned, her cloak swaying like shadow. Bring the human to me, alone. Minutes later, Mason stood before the queen. He didn't bow, didn't tremble. He looked around her throne room like he was checking for broken parts. So, something need fixing? The guards raised their weapons at his tone. The queen raised her hand to stop them. You're brave, mechanic, or stupid. You walked near death yesterday and it lowered its head to you. Mason shrugged. I don't scare easy. Machines break, creatures think. If you listen close, they tell you what's wrong. Thalexa stepped down from her throne. Her golden eyes locked onto his. You didn't fix a machine. You touched something sacred. Volcran was born from royal blood and code. He answers to me, not some grease-handed groundwalker. Mason met her gaze, unfazed. With all respect, Your Highness. He answered to kindness. Gasps echoed around the chamber. No one had ever spoken to Queen Thalexa like that. But instead of fury, she was quiet. Too quiet. Let's test your theory then. She clapped her hands. Moments later, Mason was back in the hangar. This time, there were no tools in his hands. No barriers. No armor. Just Volcran, already awake and watching. The queen watched from above behind the glass. Enter. Alone. If you survive another hour, I'll decide your worth. Mason sighed. You royal types and your games. He stepped forward. Volcran shifted. Slowly. Its wings stretched. Not fully. Just enough to feel the space. The guards watching from hidden platforms held their breath. One wrong move, and the hangar would become a grave. Mason stood still. No words, no movement. Then, he did something unexpected. He sat down on the cold floor and pulled a small box from his pocket. He pressed play. Music played, soft, old. A human song from Earth, a simple guitar. When the stars were young, we dreamed too big. Volcran tilted its head. The song played on. The dragon didn't growl, didn't attack. It listened. 40 minutes passed. The queen's eyes narrowed behind the glass. Is it the sound? The tone? A hidden signal? Her advisor whispered, No, my queen. It's the connection. The human is speaking the one language no one else ever tried. Care. The hour ended. Mason stood. Volcran stepped forward close, then lowered its head again. Mason gently touched the side of its steel-scale cheek. You're not a monster, are you? You're just tired of being one. The beast didn't move. Didn't burn. It simply blinked, slow and calm. The hangar doors opened. Queen Thalexa entered. Her footsteps echoed on the metal. She stood before Mason with a new look in her eyes. Not anger, not confusion. Worry. You didn't just touch the dragon. Human. You've touched something deeper. You've touched control I thought belonged only to me. Mason didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He just looked at her. Steady. You control with fear. I fix with trust. And trust goes deeper than chains. The queen said nothing, but deep in her heart a crack had formed. Because she saw the truth. The human hadn't taken power. The dragon had given it. The dragon roared in its sleep. Not in rage, not in hunger, but like a broken engine choking on old memory. Mason Rook stood beside the giant creature once feared across half the galaxy. Volcrin, steel-plated wings, carbon bone claws, a living nightmare. But Mason didn't see a monster. He saw a machine, one that no one bothered to understand. Queen Thalexa watched from above, arms folded. She still didn't trust him. You say it's not magic, then prove it. Mason walked slowly toward Volcrin's flank, pulling on gloves. He knelt at the base of the beast's shoulder, right where armor met flesh. There, hidden under a worn scale, was a small rectangular Port A hatch. Right here, he said. Ancient tech port. Human design. He opened it with a magnet pin. Inside were dusty circuits, old Earth signatures, even faded logos. This isn't pure alien biotech. This is Terran engineering, spliced with DNA code. You didn't build him from scratch, you modified him. Thalexa frowned. That port hasn't worked for centuries. Mason grinned. Then it's a good thing I brought century-old tools. From his backpack, he pulled out a tiny square device. It clicked into the port like it belonged there. My grandfather fixed harvesters with one of these. Guess we're not that different after all. He pressed a button. The screen blinked once, then again. Lines of code scrolled. A heartbeat sound echoed from deep inside Volcrin's chest. The beast stirred. Suddenly, a hologram projected from the port. It showed blueprints, skeletal designs, and deep within the structure, behavioral programming layers. He's got a core behavior chip, Mason said softly. Obey orders, react to tone, follow logic trees. But someone overrode it with fear commands. Thalexa stepped forward slowly. Are you saying it wasn't loyalty? Mason didn't look at her. He kept reading. It wasn't even control, it was confusion. You flooded him with pain signals when he disobeyed. You didn't train a dragon. You broke a machine that wanted to understand. Volcrin's eye opened. Not wide, just a slit. Mason didn't back away. He pressed a soft button on the tool. Command line, clear aggression response. Set to passive protocol. Code word, easy. He turned to the dragon. Easy, big guy. The beast took a deep breath and exhaled warm air, not fire. For the first time, Volcrin blinked without. The palace guards lowered their weapons. A few even took a step closer in wonder. Mason closed the hatch gently. This was never about taming. It was about reconnecting him to what he was made to be. The queen stood frozen. Her strongest weapon, her symbol of fear and power, had just obeyed a mechanic with a smile and a scanner. Why you? She asked. Why would he choose you? Mason shrugged. I didn't choose him. I just spoke the language no one else bothered to learn. The queen didn't reply. She turned and left the hangar without another word. But her world was shifting under her feet because if the dragon wasn't magic, then maybe her rule wasn't either. That night, Mason sat by Volcrin's cradle. He didn't leave. He just cleaned old panels, repaired old wire feeds, and whispered, You were never the beast, were you? Volcrin rumbled low, like a purr made of thunder. Night fell on the palace of Zelzaria. Most slept, but the dragon didn't, and neither did the man he watched. Mason Rook sat cross-legged near Volcrin's massive body under dim lights in the private hangar. He was halfway through, rewiring the old stabilizer unit built into the beast's neck. Wires, dust, humming sounds. Just another puzzle. You've got old bones, big guy, Mason muttered. But we're making them shine again. Volcrin rumbled softly, not growling, relaxed. But far above, on the outer wall of the palace, a shadow crept. A figure moved without sound, wrapped in black armor. Eyes glowing blue, a member of the Queen's secret wing. Silent, deadly, loyal only to the throne. He had one mission, erase the human. Deep in the palace, Queen Thalexa stared at a screen. She didn't blink. She didn't speak. Only watched as the assassin moved closer to the hangar entrance. Her voice was low, cold. If the human breaks the beast's code, I lose control. If the beast breaks for him, I lose fear. She clenched her jaw. End it before it becomes legend. In the hangar, Mason stood to stretch. He didn't hear the door hiss open silently. He didn't see the figure slip inside. But Volcran did. The dragon's eye opened wide. Its head turned slowly. But it didn't growl. It didn't roar. It simply watched. The assassin crept forward, blade in hand, steps like a whisper. 10 meters. 5, 3. Mason felt the air shift. Too late. Thwip. A silent dart flew toward his neck. He spun, but the dart never hit him. It bounced off the floor, because it never made it. Volcran had moved. Not loudly, not violently, but just enough. A claw the size of a tree trunk had swung out, intercepting the dart midair, then silence. Mason turned. What the hell? He saw the assassin. He saw Volcran standing between them, and then Volcran roared, not a war cry, but a warning. The assassin froze. He stepped back. One mistake. Volcran pounced. The attack was fast, precise, not lethal. He slammed the assassin into the wall with a single claw, pinning him like a nail. The blade dropped. The lights flickered. Mason stared in shock. Then slowly, he smiled. You protected me. Volcran turned his head, hummed low, his golden eyes locked with Mason's. It was clear now. He didn't just obey. He cared. Guards rushed in moments later, blasters ready. They paused, seeing the assassin stuck, and the dragon calm. Mason raised a hand. He's not out of control, he's in control for the first time. Up above, Queen Thalexa watched everything. Her chest was tight. This wasn't what she wanted, not even what she feared. It was worse, because she saw it clearly. The dragon chose the human over her. Hours later, Thalexa sat alone in her throne. From the moonlight hit her face. She whispered to herself, he has no crown, no weapon, no army. She looked down at her hands. So why does he have my monster's heart? And in the hangar, Mason placed a soft blanket over his shoulder and leaned against Volcran's leg. You're not just a machine, he said. You're more than they ever gave you credit for. The dragon exhaled slow, warm, and safe. Queen Thalexa had never lost control, not once. Not over her armies, not over her court, and definitely not over her dragon. But today, everything felt different. Because Volcran, her greatest weapon, her symbol of fear, now followed the voice of a quiet human mechanic. And not because he was commanded, but because he wanted to. The throne room was cold and silent. Guards stood still, unsure where their loyalty should fall now. Then the doors opened. Mason Rook walked in, not with swagger, not with fear, just calm steps, worn boots, grease on his hands, and the dragon was not with him. That made it worse. Thalexa rose slowly. Her armor gleamed, but her voice had changed. It wasn't thunder. It was measured. Human. I could have you removed from this world. No trial, no noise. Mason nodded. Probably. But then you'd lose the only person your dragon listens to. The queen's jaw twitched. He was never yours to claim. Mason stepped closer. He's not a pet. He's not a weapon. He's a being. And you never claimed him. You caged him. A long silence passed. Then, Thalexa did something no one expected. She sat. What do you want, human? Mason blinked. Sorry? You broke my beast. You humiliated my court, and still I sense no ambition in you, no thirst for power. She leaned forward. So what? Do you want? Mason didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into his backpack and pulled out a small device. He placed it on the queen's desk. That's a behavior emulator. Something I've been building since the first night I touched Volcran. He pressed a button. A hologram appeared. Dozens of dragons flying in formation, not with fear-based triggers, but with light signals and sound pulses. This is what I want. Alexa stared at the display. You want a dragon army? Mason shook his head. I want a dragon bond. A system where these creatures don't burn planets. They rebuild them, patrol them, protect them. Not monsters, guardians. The Queen stood slowly. That would require retraining every creature in my arsenal, rebuilding the way we control them. Teaching trainers not to punish but to earn trust. It would take years. Mason crossed his arms. Better years spent fixing mistakes than making new ones. Queen Alexa stared at him for a long time, then finally said, Very well, I will allow this experiment, but on one condition. Mason raised an eyebrow. You will stay, train them yourself, and you will report directly to me. Mason chuckled. I'm a mechanic, not a prince. Then act like one, and leave the throne to me, she said, eyes glinting. He thought for a moment, then nodded. Deal, but one more thing. No more shock collars. No more pain commands. You want a real dragon army? Then let them choose who they follow. The Queen said nothing, just extended her hand. He took it. The alliance was made, not with blood or swords, but with understanding. Later that day, Mason walked through the training ground. Dragons hissed from cages. Handlers watched him with distrust. Volcran walked beside him, calm and silent like a shadow. One guard muttered, Why him? Another replied, Because he saw the dragon, not just the fire. From the tower, Alexa watched it all and whispered to herself, He's not taming the beast. He's teaching us how to listen. Peace makes some powerful, but it makes others restless. And not everyone in Queen Alexa's court liked the changes Mason Rook had brought. Dragons trained with kindness. Loyalty earned with touch instead of pain. To the old commanders, it sounded like weakness wrapped in philosophy. Especially to one man, General Korvek, master of the war kennels. Korvek had served the Queen for 20 years. He had trained every dragon in the palace except Volcran. Volcran had never listened to him, only feared him. Now the beast followed a human. With a backpack, Korvek's pride burned hotter than any flame. This human poisons the order, he told his soldiers, and I will end it, by fire or blade. That night, Korvek acted. He and his loyalists stormed the dragon pens. They shocked the handlers. They hacked the control chips, and they took 3 untrained dragons, wild, unpredictable, dangerous. But worse. They hacked Volcran's collar, inserted old pain code programming, hoping to reverse the bond Mason had built, to make Volcran rage again. As alarms blared across the palace, Mason ran toward the training ground. He didn't wear armor. He didn't carry weapons, just his old bag, half-zipped, and fear behind his eyes. When he reached the yard, it was chaos. Dragons screeched, soldiers screamed. Fire lit the sky like a second sunrise, and in the middle of it all stood Korvek, laughing madly as one dragon snapped free and soared upward. Volcran was chained again, his eyes flashing red. Pain signals surged through his body. Mason sprinted toward him. Volcran, look at me! The beast growled. Claws dug into the ground, smoke curled from its jaws. The collar hissed, tightening, sending shockwaves into its nerves. Mason dropped to his knees. It's not real. It's not you. They're lying. To your mind, Volcran roared and stepped forward, burn ready in his chest. High above, Queen Alexa stood at her tower window. A guard asked, Shall we fire on the dragon? She clenched the edge of the window frame. No. If he falls now, we lose more than a beast. Korvek shouted from across the yard. The human has no command now. The dragon follows pain again. But Mason shook his head. He reached into his bag, pulled out a small metal plate, the very first component he had cleaned on Volcran's frame. He held it up. Remember this? This was the first time someone touched you without fear. His voice cracked. I don't want you to fight for me. I want you to choose. Volkran's head trembled, his body shook, pain signals pulsed, but inside, a different beat began to rise, a quieter signal, his own. Suddenly, Volkran turned. He faced Korvek. The red lights in his collar flickered, then shattered. The dragon ripped the collar off with a swing of his neck. He raised his wings and roared. But this time, he didn't roar in rage. He roared in truth. A blast of fire engulfed Korvek's troops but curved away from Mason. Volkran flew. Not wild, not broken, but free. Korvek raised his blade in one last act of fury, and Volkran landed before him like a meteor. Claws crushed the blade, and fire ended the rebellion in one breath. Silence fell. Mason walked to Volkran's side, placed a hand on his scales. The dragon lowered his head, not in submission, but in peace. Later, the queen arrived in the yard, stepping carefully over the blackened ground. She looked at Mason, looked at the dragon, then slowly said, You didn't command him. He saw something greater than commands. Mason nodded. He saw someone who didn't want to use him. Thalexa turned to her guards. Burn the old collars. Melt the pain rods. If we are to lead with dragons, then let them fly because they want to. And Volkran? He didn't roar again that night, he just watched the stars. And for the first time in his life, he believed he belonged under them. The fire had faded, the rebellion was over. But something deeper had burned away that night. Fear. Not just from dragons, from the people, from the queen, from the idea that obedience was strength and chains meant control. In the days that followed, Mason Rook became more than the human mechanic. He became a name whispered with respect, and in some circles, awe. But Mason didn't sit on a throne. He didn't give orders. He spent his mornings the same way he always had, fixing things, broken landing gear, worn-out circuits, dragon scales that chipped under pressure. He even taught alien apprentices how to use duct tape properly. But something had changed. Everyone watched him now. Not with mockery, with curiosity, with hope. Because he had done what no weapon ever could, he freed a creature built for war and taught it to choose peace. Queen Thalexa invited him to the palace garden one afternoon. No guards, no armor, just a conversation. You've done what I couldn't, she said softly. You taught a dragon to respect something other than fear. Mason smiled, wiped his hands on his pants. I didn't teach him. I listened to him. She nodded slowly. The Empire is changing. They now ask for your name in every council. They want to build dragon schools across the system. They want to name you Commander. Mason looked up at the stars. Volkran flew above them, wings stretched wide. Free. Proud. Never leashed again. No thanks, he said gently. Thalexa blinked. You refuse command? Mason chuckled. I fix things, Your Majesty. Titles don't fix anything. Later that night, he walked to the open dragon fields. The first training school had just opened. Dragons rested without cages. Apprentices practiced with light signals, not electric shocks. And every training post had a small phrase engraved. Trust, first then flight. Emir Volkran landed nearby, his shadow stretching across the field. Mason climbed up without fear. No saddle, no reins, just two friends sharing the wind. You ready, big guy? The dragon huffed softly. Let's show them what choice looks like. They flew over cities that once feared dragons. Now children waved as they passed. Statues weren't made of kings anymore. They were built for the creatures that now guarded, not destroyed. In the queen's chamber, Thalexa looked over the map of her empire. Dragons watched borders, not as weapons, as protectors. Peace wasn't perfect, but it was alive, and it had started with a man and a wrench. Years later, Mason's name was written into galactic archives. Not as a general, not as a hero, but as something much rarer. The first listener, and when asked what kind of human he was, Queen Thalexa always answered the same. Not a soldier, not a prince, not a threat. He was just the right human at the right time. Final scene. A young alien girl walks beside her father on a dragon tour. She asks, "What did the first dragon rider wear in battle?" Her father smiles and replies, "Grease-stained pants, a tool belt, and a heart too big to carry." He came with a backpack. He left behind a sky full of dragons, who fly not for orders, but for the one who showed them how.